Hello and welcome back to When Hope Endures with Wesley and Mabel. Last time we were sharing the story of Mabel, the birth of our youngest, as well as the symptoms that led her to the emergency room, and ultimately a life flight over to the university hospital. When she got to the hospital and I was on my way there, I had to drive. They took her via helicopter. I got a call from one of the neurosurgeons. I believe his name was Dr. Kilgore. And he said, we need to do another MRI and we want to do an angiogram, a cerebral angiogram. I had no idea what an angiogram was. And so he explained it to me. It's where they stick a camera through your veins up to where they can get a good view of what's actually happening inside the brain.
All the way to your brain.
And they start in your leg. That's the crazy part.
Yep.
So they start in your inner thigh and go all the way up to your brain with this camera.
On the right side of the inner thigh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't remember that first one.
Right, that you had two. You had a second one afterwards as a follow-up. But he called me to get permission. And at that point, I was like, anything you can do at this point. You guys are the experts in this. You know better than I do. So I gave my permission for that. And so when I got there to the hospital, I had to wait a while in the entrance area. I had to wait until they actually put you in a room. Because they took you straight to the MRI, straight to the angiogram. They hadn't even assigned you a room yet. They're in the Neuro ICU. And I don't know, it might have been half hour, might have been an hour, but it was the longest time ever because I wanted to see you. I wanted to know what was going on because I had very little information at that point. Even when I tried to ask the neurosurgeon, he didn't have a lot of information to give me either. They needed to get the video and the information, the test done for themselves.
Yeah, and I don't remember that time, but later you telling me that you or the neurosurgeon or anybody knew what the effects were.
Right, we didn't know what the long-term effects were going to be. I didn't even know what the effects were at that time. All I knew was you had talked about not being able to see, and I thought maybe there was some memory loss because you were struggling with names. So I was completely in the dark there waiting.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I got the call I was waiting for when they said, we have her in a room, you can come up. It was before the visiting hours, so at that time, we were on the second year of COVID, so they still had a 9 to 9 visiting hours. But because you were being recently admitted, they let me come up for a short period of time to see you. And when I got up there, as results from information from the angiogram, as well as the information from the MRI, I actually got to talk to the doctor, the neurosurgeon at that time. And that's when he explained to me that it was due to, it was a brain bleed. So a hemorrhagic stroke as opposed to an ischemic stroke. An ischemic stroke is due to a blood clot, where hemorrhagic stroke is due to a bleed in the brain. And it was due to RCVS, which is reversible cerebral vasoconstriction syndrome, which basically means your vessels have different parts where they are more constricted and weak than other parts. So the best way I can explain this is a balloon animal. You twist up the balloon animal, and then when you untwist it, you no longer have this perfectly beautiful straight balloon. Now you have these little weak points and these little dips where the balloon was twisted. And so that's how the vessels in your brain was they had these little dips in there, which were weak points. It would also cause headaches because as your blood's pushing through there, it creates kind of a resistance,
Mm-hmm.
which was causing your blood pressure to go up. It was
Mm-hmm.
causing the headaches. And it's not something that many people knew about. Where with you, it was initially diagnosed as okay, it's probably a spinal epidural headache from the spine. They wouldn't have even thought to catch this. And you can't even catch it in an MRI. That's why they had to do the angiogram.
And the interesting part is that they were like, what is it? Um, inspired to do the angiogram too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely, because they wanted to figure out what was causing it. They wanted to make sure it wasn't like vesiculitis or something where you just had weak vessels. And they wanted to figure out what it was. And that's the RCVS. Due to, there's many things that can cause RCVS. They think this may have been the Pitocin or something
Labor.
during labor. It's a very rare condition. It could be caused by constrictors. So either a really strong dose of vasoconstrictors or a prolonged use of anti-vasoconstrictors. But again, it's very rare.
I remember at the hospital when I was having the baby that they said that they couldn't bring my blood pressure up. Remember that it was
right.
That I was in a really low blood pressure and they couldn't bring it up.
Which was your normal blood pressure.
Yeah.
But they were saying it was low and kept trying to bring it up.
So I don't know if that had to do with it too, because my body was trying to regulate itself, but then I don't know if they put medicine or not. I don't remember that. But what if they put medicine so my body was like, what's going on?
Right. And that was part of the delay of us going home. Because everything went great with the birth, but they wouldn't let us go home until your blood pressure was what they consider to be normal.
Yeah.
So they explained to me about the RCVS and they asked me some questions. Were the headaches worse when she was laying down or sitting up? And with RCVS, as it is with a lot of headaches that are cerebral or originate inside the brain, you tend to have more pain when you're laying down than when you're sitting up, as opposed to an epidural headache, which should feel better when you're laying down than sitting up.
But it's really hard for me. I didn't want it to be an epidural headache anyway, because they needed, if it was that, they needed to do like the patches or something and be laying down for a period of time. And to me, laying down for a period of time doesn't work.
Right.
You can't do this. Yeah. But anyway.
And so with the RCVS, that would explain the headaches. They explain them as these thunderclap headaches, these headaches that are really strong but different than any other headaches. They feel different than a tension headache or a migraine. And I remember you telling me that these headaches were different. And so it started to kind of click there as to what the cause was. And that was, in and of itself, was good news. Because RCVS usually goes away on its own after a period of time. And just because you've had it once doesn't mean that you're prone to have it again. They've shown no correlation with reoccurrences, or at least the studies that they had done at that time.
Yeah.
But even still there when I got to see you in the hospital, you were complaining still a lot about your headaches. You would say, my head hurts. And that was understandable because you had a lot of blood and pressure there on the brain. And they were looking at some options there as to what they could do for that. One of them is they could have put a vent in there and try to let it drain out some of the blood and the pressure. And that was initially what they were going to do. I was talking with the doctor about it, and he said, I have this colleague, Dr. Grandi, and I want to see if she's a candidate for a craniotomy where they can open up her brain, the skull, and instead of having a very low percent of drainage and then your body has to reabsorb the rest of the blood and it can cause more damage, they would go in there and clean it and scrub out as much as they can. And he said it's not 100%. We usually only get around like an 80% there, but that's still better than the drain. And I said, okay, that sounds good. And he talked to his colleague and said, yeah, she's a perfect candidate for that. And the nice thing about that, and we'll get more into the craniotomy side of it, but they were actually able to clean out 90% of the excessive blood inside, excessive blood and dry blood there inside your brain. And it was cool because I got to see a before and after MRI photo of that to show how much had actually been cleared.
Yeah. And the meantime, like, I don't know when my sister-in-law was there. When was that?
She was there the craniotomy day.
Okay.
So I'm going to take a step back and go that first day that I got there. So these were conversations that we had, and it wasn't until later that they had cleared you for the craniotomy and they scheduled it for the next day.
Okay.
But I was there and they were continually asking you questions. They were asking you your name, the name of your kids, the name of your husband. And
I still couldn't find remember my last baby.
You could get your name. Yeah, you remembered you had a last baby, but you couldn't remember her name. And sometimes you'd struggle with the kids' names. You could not think of your birth date or even what state you lived in.
Okay.
So I was worried that your memory might be affected. Like, oh my gosh, is she going to have long-term, short-term memory loss? What's the permanence of this? Is she going to be able to remember her kids? I remember you saying that you can see on one side. So you had a full vision cut at that time on the right-hand side. You couldn't see anything on that side.
From both eyes.
From both eyes. So it wasn't in the eyes itself. It was in the brain processing.
There's quadrants in there.
Right.
And only my right quadrants of both eyes. Which is, like you said, in the brain. That's where I couldn't see.
Because your left side processes what's happening on the right side. Yeah, so you couldn't see. And then when you would look at people, so you could see a table, but if there was a person there, you would say, I can't see their face. I just see a shadow as if I'm seeing their soul and not an actual person.
And what I remember is that it was white. I never saw, like, the black shadow, right?
Okay.
I saw just, like, white. And, like, everything kept going and going and going. There was no end. So that's why I thought, like, oh my gosh, is this person, like, going through the mirror or something? Because I couldn't make a stop end somewhere. So that's part of my rehab. But, yeah.
And so I was like, okay, she can't see very well. Is she ever going to be able to see her kid's face again? Is she going to know what we look like? We had no idea what the lasting effects were going to be. And I even asked that to a neurosurgeon. I said, how much of this is going to be permanent? What are the effects? And he said, there's no way to know. Some stuff they get back, some they don't. And I had one of the nurses there explain to me about aphasia. They explained to me that you didn't have long or short-term memory loss, but your communication center of your brain was interrupted. In your case, you completely forgot how to read, right? You forgot numbers, what the numbers were. It wasn't really forgetting them. It's just your brain couldn't recall them.
Yeah. And that's another thing that we need to talk about, that I was in the middle of my almost last semester of college. And I was studying like a minor in accounting.
Uh-huh.
And I was in spring break. It was spring break on the college when that happened. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do? Like, I don't remember how to do this. Like, how to add or multiply or any of that.
Right, you can do 1 + 1, let alone trying to figure tax rates or debits and credits.
Yep. It was interesting.
I remember talking with you, and you could talk, but there were a lot of words that you just couldn't recall. So your sentences were quite broken. You would try to say something, and a completely different word would come out. You would try to say phone, and the word banana comes out, but you would know it's not that. You'd be like, no, banana, no. And it would just keep coming out a different word. You knew it wasn't correct. You knew the word you wanted, but it just would not come out.
Yeah, and it would be like, what day is it? And I would say, ocho. No,
right.
No, ocho. No, ocho. No.
Everything was ocho.
Yeah, everything was ocho. Or what's the year? Ocho. Or 28 or something like that too. Like, everything had to end up with an 8. And
you were stuck in 2018 for a while. 2018.
Yeah,
you could not bring yourself to 2021.
It was 2018. But I would say it in Spanish, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And yeah, I would speak Spanish to them, even though I understood what they were saying. I could only speak Spanish to them.
Well, that was interesting because that wasn't the case initially. Initially, when you were struggling even more before the craniotomy, you wouldn't speak Spanish. You were only speaking English and thinking of the words in English.
Okay.
And so I remember talking to the neurosurgeon. I'm like, is she ever going to be able to drive again with her vision? Is she going to be able to have a conversation? What's she going to be able to do? Because I really had... I was in the dark, and he would try to give me the most comfort out as he could, but for most part it was, we don't know. I remember every time it'd be, well, at least let me know, is she going to live? And even that he couldn't tell me 100%. Because, they always hope for the best outcome, but you never know.
Yeah.
So that day, I was there with you, and then they made me go home and then come back at 9:00. And I was there from 9 to 9. And that day was the day when they said, okay, we're scheduling her craniotomy, but it's going to be tomorrow. And so I spent the day with you. You had a lot of pain in your head. As well as, I remember they realized that it was just 10 days after having a baby. So the nurses were so...
about having to pump too, right?
Well, you complained about the pain from the milk. And the nurses were so sweet that they would help you pump and then send me home with the milk at night, said I could feed the baby or put it in the freezer. by that time, my sister, your sister-in-law, agreed to take the baby for a couple months
Mm-hmm.
because
Well, it was a month.
well, a month, but she agreed for as long as
Yeah.
possible. And I had the other kids at home, but I couldn't leave them all day with
The
a
baby.
baby.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to be in school, and so it worked out for her to be able to take care of the baby so I could be there with you. And that night, our son had a choir concert. It was his first. No, it wasn't his first. It was the first one of that year. So the post Christmas concert there with that choir, and I brought a laptop because you wanted to listen to it, but with your headache, you couldn't pay much attention to it there. So I kind of had to listen to it a little bit. You didn't want me to turn it off, but you couldn't see anything on it anyway.
Mm-hmm. I kind of start to remember a little bit of that. Yeah.
But you kept asking, when's my son's? And you didn't know the word for concert or whatever. When's my son? He's gonna sing, or like you try to talk your way around things. As well as they had people coming in and out all the time. So they had the physical therapy
Doing tests.
who would test your balance and walking. They had the occupational therapy and speech therapy who would show you pictures. And you couldn't see our face like we talked about in person. Mm-hmm. But in a picture, you could see the person on the picture. Because I remember you talking your way around these pictures. It was a very small print picture that had things going on. And the lady would ask you, what's this person doing? And you'd be, well, talking on, the thing you grab and say, bueno.
Yeah.
Oh, the phone. Okay, yeah, the phone. And then they point to some glasses and, well, that's what my husband wears. The words couldn't come out, but you found a way to still communicate it.
Yeah.
But you didn't want to see pictures too much on the phone because you would still struggle. Like the drawing ones, you were fine with. But pictures, you would still struggle seeing. So that next day, I had my sister go there with you. She's a nurse, and I thought, well, she might be able to ask the questions needed while she's going in for a craniotomy. And Dr. Kilgore passed you over to Dr. Granda. He now became your neurosurgeon at the time. And they did the craniotomy. And I, as a worried husband, was texting my sister all the time. Are they done yet? What's going on? How is it? And I remember when she first told me that you came out of the craniotomy, and a little bit after, you said, oh my gosh, I can see you.
Wow.
So how was that to be able to see somebody again for the first time when you had just been seeing these white figures, shadows, ghosts, whatever, walking around? You could see her face.
Yeah. I remember it. Well, no, I don't remember, but I have pictures. It's funny, right? Like sometimes you see pictures and you're like, I remember. No, I don't remember, but well, your sister and me, I don't know if it was before the craniotomy or after. I had little dots in my head.
I think it was before.
And my hair, I think she did my hair, but I don't remember when either, when that was. But I had long hair, and they didn't know what was gonna happen, and they actually kept my long hair, and they just shaved on that line
Hmm.
that they did the craniotomy.
That was another thing I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if, I mean, I would have loved you the same, but I wasn't sure if they were going to shave you bald or what was going to happen. But they made it completely unnoticeable
Mm-hmm.
unless you were looking for it by just shaving that one spot, like you said.
Yeah, just a little line. Yep.
And the couple days after your craniotomy, so much improved.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily your vision cut, but what you were able to see improved. You actually wanted to look at pictures of your kids, of your baby,
Mm-hmm.
and you would still ask, "Wait, that's my baby? That's my baby?" Like it it was still kind of surreal to you. Because it was still, I mean, you got that way anyway with some of the other kids. It took you a while to realize,
That's my
wait, I actually have
baby.
a baby, right?
Yeah.
um but that's when you started to speak more fluently in Spanish.
Mm-hmm. And they always ask me also, like, okay, if we went out to walk, because we had to go out to walk to go to the physical therapy place.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, what's your room number? And I was like, ocho.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, your room number is this. I never ever remember my room number. Even when I got better, I still didn't know what room number I was.
I do remember that. That was so after a little bit they moved you into acute care from the ICU, and that's when they worked more with the physical therapy and occupational therapy with you, and they would take you walking a couple times a day, and yeah, they would try to get you to remember that number, or they'd ask you what time it was,
Yep. And I still couldn't.
and you still couldn't get it. But little by little you were able to remember your birthday. When they'd ask you your birthday, you started to be able to say your complete birthday. You started to know the city that you lived in as well as the state.
Mm-hmm.
And so things started to come back. Names. You started to know the names of all your kids, including um, the last one.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I would call in regularly, and I remember calling in one of the nurses in the middle of the night to make sure everything was going fine.
Uh-huh.
And I asked how you were doing, and she said, you know, she's doing really good. She knows her name, her birthday. She said, I even asked her if she knew who the president was. And she said, I wish I didn't, but but yes. And not getting political, it was just kind of a funny comment there.
Yep, I remember that part.
And
Like,
things finally started to click again.
mhm. Yeah.
And at that point, it was nice because we're able to start having more visitors to visit with you. So one of your friends, she would go down there a couple times to be with you. And your mom came over and stayed with us. So when I was up there, she could be with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would still take the kids to school, but then your mom would be there when they got home.
Mm-hmm.
Or if I had to be with the kids, your mom would be up there with you at the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And you're able to talk with them more. You're able to communicate a little better. So that made it nicer.
Yeah, it was very slow, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I would be like, hi. Like, I would take like,
Hang on to the notes or
yeah.
the words.
Yeah. It was like singing. Yeah, I remember that. That was a little long term. But then I started to be better.
I remember that each night when I would leave, you wouldn't want me to leave because you didn't want to be alone.
Yeah, because you were there until 9, and I didn't want you to be like, it was alone completely. And sometimes the nurses would do their work over there because I didn't want them to leave either. So just a couple times, and they would be like, we'll be back, and they would never be back. But I'm pretty sure they were very busy. But I remember them being so nice to me, and there was this guy that was about to get married or something, and he was asking me for songs in Spanish, and I'm like, I don't remember. Like, he was trying to make conversation. Yeah.
You had some really good nurses there to
Mm-hmm.
help you out.
Yeah.
You didn't get much sleep at night either because every 2 hours they would wake you up to give a shot into your stomach.
No, it was a medicine, pill.
Oh, the big pill.
It was a big, huge pill, which they were wondering if I could swallow. I had to swallow that horse pill,
right?
Every 2 hours.
They made you eat basically blended food for a while because they didn't think you could swallow, but then they'd make you swallow this huge pill.
Yeah. And then pumping, like, it was like either I never slept because it was like taking it every 2 hours, the pill, and then every 4 hours to pump, and like it was a big ordeal. Like, I got super tired, but I wanted to be day, so you or my mom or whoever was gonna come to be with me.
And the pill was to prevent against seizures. They'd make you take that. The shots they gave you, yeah, that wasn't every 2 hours, but that was a couple times a day.
Yeah.
And that was a blood thinner.
And those shots were in my stomach, and they did not hurt at all until the last day. The last day that I was leaving, I started to get so scared of needles again. In that time, I was like, okay, you have to do whatever you could, like, you have to do. But the last days, anyway, they were like crazy mobbies coming back.
Right? So when I'd leave at night, in order to not feel too lonely, you would search the TV for a show that you could watch.
Nothing.
There was nothing on, so you would watch Friends every night. You never watched Friends beforehand, but you would watch it every night as kind of a little comfort blanket or whatever.
I would sleep with that.
Yeah, and then also we would be on the phone a lot.
But I would ask the nurses to call because I couldn't use my phone at all.
You wanted to at one point. And I said, no, I even told the nurses, keep the phone away from her because I don't want her deleting all the apps and everything on there. Because you didn't know how to read, you didn't know what was what, or even how to use the phone. But you really wanted to call.
Yep.
So from the moment I would wake up, or you would wake up and you'd have them call, to the time I would get there, and then when I was leaving, I would call you again. We were always on the phone. Either I was there with you, or I was on the phone with you when I was heading there, or I was on the phone when we were heading back. And one of the nurses even asked, so how long have you guys been married? And at that point we said 15 years. And she was completely surprised that even after 15 years, we were always on the phone.
Talk to him.
Right?
Yeah.
Another thing I remember there was cartoons. Right? If you went to watch Shrek or some other animated film, you would complain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I couldn't see the full picture. I could see like I don't know if you guys seen Shrek and like the what is it called when they
Like the deleted scenes
uh-huh.
that aren't fully edited.
Uh-huh. That's how I saw Shrek. Not like just the drawing, but like when the donkey was like the hair was like all over the place. You know, like pokey instead of nice and smooth. I saw everything so pokey. Like it wasn't very fun to watch.
Yeah, I
Or
remember you saying, does this look normal? Because it looks like it's unedited or it looks like the
uh-huh.
deleted scenes.
Yeah. Also, what's the other one? Raya? Raya.
Mm-hmm.
That happened too is Raya. Yep. That was so interesting.
It was nice because they finally had you eating solid foods, but you would order the same thing every day for breakfast.
Yep. And my every day was French toast for breakfast. French toast. And they were horrible. But I loved them.
Rubbery.
Yeah. But I loved them. And what do you want for breakfast? French toast. And then until one time I got super tired of food. I mean, the food that they gave me, which was I don't even remember what they gave me, just jello and very simple foods.
Right, because they didn't know if you could swallow.
And so one nurse, she's like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, "I want a sandwich or something like that." And she's like, "Okay, there's some sandwiches, but I don't know if you can eat or not because they like you have restriction, but I'm gonna see if I can bring you one." And that was like so good.
She did a turkey sandwich she brought you.
And she after that I could eat that. But then those were like the snacks, right? The sandwiches were the snacks. And then they asked me what do you want for dinner when I started eating, and I only had one thing every single day, and that was the Southwest salad.
Yep.
Every single day was French toast and Southwest salad.
So answer me honestly here. Was it because that's really what you wanted? Or that's what you knew was on the menu and you were afraid to choose anything else?
That's probably it. But no, I think I tried ordering because when they came like 3 times and I only ate 2 times. And they I tried like something different, like pita chips with what's it called, the other thing, the hummus. Because of I ordered a big full, that was my dinner. That's true. My breakfast was French toast. My lunch was the salad. Mm-hmm. And my dinner was just pita chips with hummus because I wasn't hungry to eat a full-on meal. And I don't know. Maybe that was the only thing that sounded good every day. And I'm a very indecisive person, so it's like, okay, I'll just eat this. And so that's the only thing I knew how to say it without getting nervous when I called them.
Because you used to have to call in and say, hey, I'm ready to order my... Sometimes they would stop by, but a lot of times you had to call in then to order.
Yep.
So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the prayers and the miracles that happened here. So, when I knew you were going, or when you were being life flighted, I told my family. I told my boss at work, said, hey, I don't know when I'm going to be back to work, but I have this going on. And I would get information from, and your family as well. I told your family that people that didn't even know you, friends of family, friends of people at work, and families of people at work, because they let people
No.
across the company know, and then they told their friends and their family about it, and then your family told people they know, and prayers were just pouring in. So many people of different faiths, of different beliefs, all praying for you. And that was a very touching moment for me, because you were going through a very tough time, but yet there was so much good in the world at that time. So a lot of times we don't see that, but these are people that don't even know you. They're taking time out of their day to pray for your recovery. And I would just hear, yeah, my cousins are praying for her. And this is somebody that didn't even know you, because there's somebody I barely work with at work, but they had their cousins praying for you. Or it was very, very touching and very humbling, right? Seeing so many people, like I said, different faiths, different beliefs, all just coming together, believing in one thing. And we'll talk a little more about the miracles when we talk about recovery, but even up to this point, some of the things that happened. So when I was talking with the neurosurgeon and they were reviewing the MRI, he let me know that you could actually see the bleeding start in the middle of the MRI. So the timing was a miracle, right? I'm not going to say it was just, I'm not going to say it was luck. It was miraculous. Had they done the MRI earlier, they wouldn't have even caught the RCVS, because that requires an angiogram. They would have said you're fine and sent you home. Or if they had taken longer for the MRI, the damage could have been a little more permanent. But the MRI was done at the perfect amount of time. When they did the craniotomy, instead of the lower percent, they were able to clean out 90% of the dry blood and the bleeding from there. The way that it was more closer to the surface and everything. So as we were going through, we were seeing miracle after miracle. And we'll talk more of those when we get into rehab and then coming home as well.
But also the helicopter too, right?
Yes.
That it was there.
Right. They have a helicopter pad, but they don't always have a helicopter stationed there at that hospital. But that night, they didn't have to wait for one to come. They already had one there, ready to go. Everything just kind of lined up. And it definitely, when I would see those things, it would continue to give me the hope. Right? I'd see the prayers and think, you know what? With this many people come together with faith, I know that things are going to work out the way they're supposed to.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect, but we kind of knew that things were going to happen the way they were supposed to. With that many people praying for you, even with one person praying for you, you know that things are going to happen the way they're supposed to. And when we started seeing miracle after miracle and counting the blessings, I really think it made a difference in the continued progression that you kept making after that point.
Yep.
I think that's a good place to end for this episode. We'll talk more about rehab and the time in the rehab in the next episode with speech therapy, physical therapy, and occupational therapy, and the road you had to recovery.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, and join us next time.